Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Simply Nerdy. I'm your host, Austin, and today we have a very special guest. We are joined by none other than Jeff Beck, the creator and marketing director from family company Grandpa Beck Games, not to mention a phenomenal photographer and comedian and a man with a penchant for dad jokes. And so,
well, thank you. I never knew I had a penchant before, but I guess I do. So.
We've just given you the penchant.
I'm trying to lose it right now by going to the gym a couple times a week. But
oh my gosh. Wonderful. Well, first off, we just wanted to congratulate you for the contract that you recently signed with Deseret Book to produce 5 new games that will be sold in their stores. So that's incredible news.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting, honestly. So
yeah, very cool. And thank you again. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. So today we have Anthony and Steven over here. We got Lisa down here. You got myself from the normal panel. And we're also joined by David from Shelf Help Gaming. Thanks again for joining us, David. We're excited to have you here as we interview Jeff Beck. Yeah. So Jeff, first off, we'd like to ask, what year did Grandpa Beck Games start? And also, what's the story behind the company being named Grandpa Beck's Games?
Grandpa Beck's Games, it's hard to pin down the actual start time because there's a lot of development time before anything was released. And actually a couple of print runs that totally failed and were literally thrown away before anything ever sold. So, it officially started probably in like 2007, 2008, but I think 2010, don't quote me on that, but I think 2010 was the first time that they went to Toy Fair and actually had some products to demonstrate. The company was started entirely by my parents. I was actually, during most of the time while they were kind of starting the development of the company, I was on a mission for the LDS Church in Honduras and then studying at BYU. So I wasn't heavily involved at the outset of Grandpa Beck's Games. And their first titles that they created were a game called Golf, which was the one that they actually had under a different name. They found out that name was being used by someone else, and also the packaging was terrible. It wouldn't stand up on the shelf. And they ordered a bunch of them, and they literally were so bad. And I think it was a lawsuit for the company name at the time, because it wasn't Grandpa Beck's Games originally. It was going to be called Grampy Games, which is terrible. So I'm glad that we got sued, and we didn't use that name. I hope my parents don't listen to this. So anyways, that print run literally was discarded, and most people would have just quit at that point in time and said that was a tremendous waste of time and money. But my parents were persistent, and they really believed that they had great games and that there was a dearth of great family card games that were being produced. And this was really before kind of the modern revolution of board gaming that started a few years ago. So this is kind of leading up to that time period. So they designed Golf, and then a game called Cover Your Assets, and a game called Nuts About Mutts, and then their fourth one was called Skull King. And of those 4, Cover Your Assets and Skull King were by far the most successful. Cover Your Assets is really what paved the way for everything else from that point forward. Somewhere along that way, I started getting involved in helping out with some marketing decisions and playtesting games, and I wrote the rules for the games as well for Cover Your Assets and Skull King. I rewrote the rules after a couple of printings and condensed them and added in some more brevity and diagrams to explain them. And then I got to design my first game, which was The Bears and the Bees. And that's when I really started to become more actively involved in the company, was working on that project.
Nice. What year was that one?
Bears and the Bees. I have ADHD, which if you're born deaf, that means you have no sense of hearing. If you're blind, you have no sense of sight. I have no sense of time. And so I can't remember, but it was a few years ago.
According to Board Game Geek, it was 2018.
Oh, perfect. You beat me to it. I was literally Googling Board Game Geek right now. Thank goodness for the internet. It's where the rest of my brain is stored. So I was going to guess 2019. So that's pretty close.
You're in good
Yeah,
company.
so-
I also have ADHD, so.
Yes, it's shocking that people in a nerdy board game community have ADHD. I've never seen that before. Anyway, the Bears and the Bees was my first kind of foray into game design. It's unique in the GrandFabX game line in that every other game in our company, with the exception of that one, started off as another classic card game that was then modified and tuned up and given a custom theme and made into a customized game. But the Bears and the Bees is completely original from my own brain, and it does incorporate elements that you'll notice in other games, but that's the reality of like every game that comes out. Games are a lot like cakes in that no one can bake a cake without using basically the same sorts of ingredients, and games are just a combination of mechanics that are mixed together in different ways. So every game has its own set of mechanics that are combined together, but if you pick apart board games, you can start to see mechanics from one game to the next, and it's not very often anymore that we come out with an entirely new mechanic that hasn't been seen before. Most of them are incorporating and reinventing and recombining existing mechanics that already have been used before.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, that's way cool. So I actually went to Utah Valley University, and I was doing a game design pilot program that they had going on within the computer science and digital media emphasis. And one of the tasks that we were given was to do a prototype of a board. Well, there's a board game prototype of the games that we were to design, the video games. And I just remember it being a blast being able to make a kind of a board game version of that. I'm curious what the typical process is like when going from simple concepts to the final product for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times, sometimes you start off with an idea for a mechanic, and then the theme evolves from there. For me, more often, I actually start with the idea of a theme or a concept or a name, and then
or a joke or dad pun,
or
maybe.
Joke. Yes. and from there, the mechanics kind of fall into my head is really the best way I can put it. Like literally, probably 90% of the greatest game ideas I've had are while I'm taking a shower, and I'll just be thinking about something, and then all of the ideas will flow together. And as weird as it sounds, I'll play those mechanics in my head, like against other people, and kind of test if they work. Interestingly, once I take that idea and then create a prototype, usually it plays differently than what I imagined it, but I very seldom imagine a concept that doesn't work. It just takes some tuning and modification from the time that I start working on it to the time that I perfect it. After I come up with a concept or idea or the name, and I figure out what the base mechanics are, the next step typically is actually in Excel, where I'll build out the game in an Excel spreadsheet where I can start to go through and name the components, and then write in the cells what the functions of each one of those components is, the quantities of them, and then the values of them if it's a game that has a point-based system. Probably the skill set that I bring to the board game design field that is kind of unique is that I really love math and statistics and probabilities, and I'm also really good with social interactions. And a great game, the reason it's fun is that the game is challenging enough that you feel like you have that it's not going to be super easy to win, but that it also stays close enough that you feel like you could have won if you just made a couple decisions differently, and that it also engages everyone at the table and gives them adrenaline and dopamine. Those are the two most important chemicals for gameplay interaction. What would you think is our best selling game in our entire lineup? We now have 10 games in our lineup. Which sells the best?
Hands down, is Skull King.
I would have thought either Skull King or Cover Your Assets. One of those two.
Why do you think Skull King, David?
Well, just because I think I think all of your games, especially here in Utah, have a really good following. But I think they're criminally underrated in the wider board game.
With the exception of maybe Skull King, that one sounds pretty well known.
Skull King and Cover Your King, or Cover Your Assets, excuse me, were the two that I had played and was introduced to first. and I think those are popular enough that they've broken out of into the wider board game industry.
Yeah, and in the wider board game industry, you're correct that Skull King does outsell Cover Your Assets, but globally, across all of our sales channels, Cover Your Assets outsells Skull King about 5-1.
Really?
Whoa!
And
Wow.
Skull King is a much better game. However, Cover Your Assets can be played by a much broader audience.
That's true. It's a lot more
simpler.
Simpler rules, easier to understand.
Cover Your Assets is the ultimate chemical roller coaster, because that game, you get to play the role of victim and villain, and you're constantly in either a state of anticipative fear or of triumph, which gives you adrenaline and dopamine. And what that does is that as you're playing around the table, that game is as fun as the people that you play it with. Because if you just play it totally straight and don't get any emotion involved in it, and you just don't care that you're losing your stuff. But if you care a little bit and you get frustrated, say, I can't believe you just took those from me, and you stole from me last time, and or gloat a little bit when you take something from someone else, that's what ignites those feelings. And what ends up happening is it doesn't even matter what you're doing around the table. You're entertaining each other because your bodies are full of chemicals, and that make you more fun. It makes you relax and also tense up, and so you're punchier and sillier with each other, and it creates an experience of social improv around your table. And so afterwards you go, that game was so much fun, and I had so much fun with people that I played it. And it doesn't even really matter what the mechanics of that game were. It's just that you got invested in it enough that it made you sociable and have a fun experience with your friends. And Cover Your Assets is unique in that it can be played by kids as young as like 4 or 5 years old up to grandma and grandpa. And it has super simple mechanics. It's like literally like a matching game. It's like war, but you make stacks. But that mechanic is really easy to understand and a really great mechanic. It's if Cover Your Assets were compared to like a vehicle, it'd be like a bicycle that has like a V8 engine strapped onto it, where it has no tricks. There's not really any polish or refinement, but it's got one big roaring engine in the center that's super entertaining, and that's what makes it fun. Whereas Skull King is more of a complete package where you have lots of different levels of strategy. You can add in additional features to the game, and that is really what I tried to do with Cover Your Kingdom. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that title or played it. Go ahead, David.
So like I said, the Cover Your Assets was the first game that I played from you guys, and then when I heard that there was a fantasy themed version, I bought that right away.
That is made for this audience right here.
This is one of our family favorites. Cover Your Kingdom, for those that don't know, is Cover Your Assets, but you have 2 piles, and it's fantasy themed with a couple other little quirks thrown in there.
I like to say it's magically malicious. So
yeah.
So Cover Your Assets is an inherently mean game.
Gosh.
It brings out almost the worst in people. Cover Your Kingdom was fully intended to bring out the absolute worst in people. So I had to give that one a really punchy, ridiculous fantasy theme, because it literally probably has led to someone be knifed at the table because it's so aggressively mean.
So I do have a question, and I've been kind of sitting on it being like, wow, I shouldn't ask this. But you did admit it's a mean game. So some of us have the affliction of being what is known as a poor sport.
Yes.
So how do you have tips for people that are
play Cover Your
like
Cookies is my recommendation, because that was the version of Cover Your Assets I designed for people who struggle with really competitive games. So
wait, what is it called?
It's called Cover Your Cookies. It's a game that we did with Crumble Cookies last year that I designed to be the opposite of Cover Your Kingdom. Whereas Cover Your Kingdom ramps up the intensity and the aggression, Cover Your Cookies takes the meter the other direction to make it easier for kids to play without getting their feelings hurt. And it relies on a couple of very small but substantial changes in the way that the game works. First off, I took the values of the cards, which in Cover Your Assets range from 5 up to 50. And in Cover Your Cookies, they range from 10 to 25. Mm-hmm. So your what that does mathematically is in a game of Cover Your Assets, you could have a stack of cards this big and your neighbor could have one this big, and you could have way more points than them if you have all the homes and the classic autos and all the golds and silver shoved in there, and they just have a huge stack of stamp collections and everything. Because you literally need 10 stamp collections, which is all of them, to equal one gold card. And you can have 8 or 9 of the golds and silvers in one collection at the end of the game if everyone's chasing it. So in Cover Your Cookies, the cookie values are 10, 15, and 20. And then the wild values are 15 and 25. So you no longer have these massive variations, meaning that at the end of the game, if you have stacks of similar size, they're going to be much closer in value, meaning that you don't get crazy blowout wins and losses, which is actually a good thing for the game. You don't want a person to end with 20 points while their opponent has 800. Like that makes you go, well, I don't think I want to play this again. That wasn't super fun. You want the scores to feel tight. It's kind of like a good analogy of that is the Super Bowl. Not many people enjoy watching a Super Bowl that's a 47-3 blowout. It's not very exciting. It's like unless you're a super homer major fan of that team and you don't want any anxiety that they're going to win, it's not fun for most people who are just casually watching. So you want to keep games feeling tight. The biggest mechanical change, though, in Cover Your Cookies was the addition of a mechanic called the Crumb Collector. And that is a large card that has numbers on it and a little track that as you go up the track, the number gets higher. What that does is each time that someone else swipes your set of cookies, your top set of cookies, it leaves behind some crumbs, and you get 15 points for every set that leaves. Now, the lowest value set that you could possibly have is 20 with 2 10-value cookies, and once another card's been added to that, it's worth 30. So that crumb is always going to be worth, at the maximum it's going to be worth is 50% of the value of the set that's departing. However, for little kids that aren't super great at math to begin with, they're just like, I got some crumbs. I got to move up this little track. And I'm okay now that I lost the cards because look at that. That's really cute. I got to go to this next plate here. And it's amazing. Like I've had so many people comment and say like that game, we had to ban it from our house. I had someone tell me that they literally burned their copy of Cover Your Assets as a family.
Oh my goodness!
Like a ritual.
I was thinking like this sounds like the kind of blood feud you'd get from playing Monopoly together.
Oh yeah. Except for that Monopoly can last 2 or 3 hours.
Not quite the time investment.
15 minutes. So.
And not quite the excitement and happiness either. Monopoly is a great game for me to play if I'm like trying to fall asleep at nighttime. So
the thing for me is like I feel like I am less of a sore loser. Not than Lisa, but but when the game is
you are
when a game is short enough that I can feel like I get over it. I'm just like, let's just jump in another game. Let's
do it again.
Let's do it again. Give me another chance.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's really a secret of Cover Your Assets as well, is that it has short play time. So you go, oh, I was close. Let's do it again. The next time I'm going to win it. The next time I can get it because I was close this time. And so it allows you to jump right back in, and it doesn't feel like you invested 2 hours into something to lose. I am not a very competitive person, honestly. I'm really, which is kind of hilarious because I think Cover Your Kingdom might literally be one of the most competitive games that has ever been made by a person who is not very competitive. I game with family and friends for the social interaction, and if I win, that's great. But if I don't win, I had a great time. The point is that you have fun playing it. Now, to answer your question again here, Lisa, you said, what do you do with people that struggle with being a sore loser or having a hard time with that? And I don't even really like the term sore loser. It's just a person who is an intense gamer, is what I like to call it. That they care about the outcome because they really enjoy the experience. My advice is you can try playing some cooperative games, in which everyone wins or loses. However, I strongly advise people that if you have kids that struggle with winning and losing appropriately, keep playing competitive games in your home because you want to teach them while they're in your home how to win and lose appropriately.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because that's a skill set that carries over into every aspect of your life, and you do not want to raise a kid that's going to gloat over their coworkers if they get a raise or a bonus that the other didn't, or that's going to be pouty and insult and be grouchy with their spouse or on their kids. You want to help them to develop those behaviors and teach them while you're playing games. It's actually a really great opportunity to teach how to be a gracious winner and a gracious loser while playing board games with your kids.
I love that.
Absolutely.
David, do you want to ask a question? Sorry, I know you have some questions too.
Yeah, well, Austin took the most important question right off the bat, so that was really good. So I want to ask a little bit about the Bears and the Bees. I have to admit, when I heard we were going to do this interview, I went to the local game store and bought a couple of games that I hadn't had a chance to play yet, and I picked up Bears and the Bees, and I played it with my wife, and then I played it again with my wife and my 11-year-old son, and it was really fun. I liked it. It's a very simple rule set, but it's kind of tough to make some decisions sometimes.
it definitely it is a game that it is more than it looks at the outset. And I've had people tell me before, they go, that game is stupid. There's no strategy involved. It's just all luck. And I go, you obviously did not play it. You're obviously really bad at that game. So, it is of our entire line of 10 games, the Bears and the Bees is the most skill-based game that we have.
Yeah.
It is the least luck-based. And if you are a left-brain thinker, if you're an artist or creative in other ways, you're going to do better at that game because it's all about spatial awareness and the build. Also, engineers do really well at that game because they're good planners and they can look at sequences and patterns. So it's a really fascinating game to play with people because it actually I can tell a lot of times before I play it with someone if I know them well if they're going to excel at that game or they're going to hate it. There's not like a lot of in between on that one.
It was really fun. But one thing that impressed me with that game is a lot of the times, I'll make the comparison to Uno, and this is unfair comparison because Uno is
that's totally fine. Well, honestly, there are similarities between the Bears and the Bees and Uno, and that they're both hand elimination, and they both have color matching, which is, like I said, mechanics exist within every set of game. In fact, honestly, a lot of times when I explain that game, it's really great when you're at a convention to use points of comparison and say this is kind of like dominoes, but with hexagonal cards meets Uno, in that you're trying to get rid of all the cards in your hand first to win. And some of the cards force other players to draw. So that's an easy way to understand the premise of the Bears and the Bees.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing that I really was impressed with on the game is how balanced it felt. I can't tell you how much that means to me. You said that because that was 2 years of development on that. It was by far the hardest game I've ever created to make it balanced. So tell me what you mean by balance. Well,
people who are familiar
so
with that term.
For example, in Uno, to make another comparison, the most powerful card is the Wild Draw 4, right?
And I hate that. That's the absolute worst decision ever to have a card to have two different utilities that are both insanely powerful.
Exactly.
You can play it on anything, and it also forces people to draw. That breaks one of my basic tenets of game design, in that in order for a thing to have great power, it must be difficult in order to achieve that ability.
And that's the exact point that I was going to bring, because some of the most powerful cards to play in that game are the hardest to place. And it feels really, really good when you can set that down, like, I set this up perfectly.
Your satisfaction in completing a task is directly correlated with the difficulty in achieving that task. And if they don't align, whether you are able to, you're able to succinctly notice that and put your finger on it because you're an experienced board game player. A person who has never played a game before will recognize that, whether they can consciously describe it or not. They'll know that this game feels off. This is not fair, and this is luck driven. There's no skill. This person got this huge advantage, and they did nothing to earn it. It was just luck that they happened to have this card that gave them a massive advantage that I did not have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, that was exactly what I wanted. So yeah, I just I really enjoyed the game. It was really fun. It's another one too that the first time I played, or maybe it was the second, I don't remember. One of the times we played, I was ahead, and my son and I both had 2 cards left, and my wife had a whole hand of a bunch of cards, and she just kept playing them down and eventually ended up winning by putting down a bear, and then
And then giving away a card from her hand.
Giving away her last card. And
yeah,
it's like, oh my goodness, how did you do that? And it was really amazing. But
and that's actually a really fun strategic element of that game is frequently my strategy, which I'll share with all you guys here, is I play the hardest card that I can every turn.
Yeah.
So you get rid of the order in which the difficulty of play is bear, followed by flower, followed by 2-color card, followed by 3-color card, followed by worker bee, followed by drone. That's the order of difficulty. So I hold on to the easiest cards and I get rid of the hardest cards, because then you can stun someone by playing 4 or 5 cards sequentially to go out in one turn. And that's so satisfying when you look like you're behind and then you have this massive streak of cards that you can play across the table because you've saved all of your really easy cards that are very easy to connect to get those 3-sided plays.
Yeah, and it's really hard to do though, because you've got to plan ahead, like the flowers. You have to have all the other cards touching it be the same color, so you have to set that up beforehand. And it just feels really satisfying when you're able to pull off a win like that, or not even a win, but just a sequential series of moves.
I really love that aspect of the game as well, in that I don't care, honestly, if I win or lose the game, as long as I've had some satisfying plays where I felt like I've done something cool or played something hard or gotten to play 3 or 4. It's like you feel you get little wins throughout, and you're also, it's kind of like the experience of building a puzzle together around the table, and you've built this beautiful mosaic at the end. And that's a great game. Back to you, Lisa. If you want to play a game that people's feelings don't get hurt on, like, it's really not. It is a take that competitive game, but it almost plays like a cooperative game in some ways.
Yeah, it's a really weird balance. I've never played a game like that because a lot of times, especially in the board game industry, take that mechanics are frowned upon generally.
Which is what cover your assets. That is that entire engine in the middle is just take that and take some more of that.
and I still enjoy that because that's what the game was built around. I feel like the take that mechanics in Bears and the Bees were very well balanced, because if you want to do that, execute this take that mechanic, whatever, you have to work for it, and you play your harder cards to get those more powerful.
And I'll explain the difference between the take that mechanic and cover your assets and why it feels harsh there and why it doesn't in the Bears and the Bees. Frequently in cover your assets, you are going to attack a player that is in a bad position because you have classic autos, and that's the only collection you have, but that's the only cards that I have in my hand. So I'm going to play the classic autos to attack you, even though there are other players with more cards, because that's what I can do. Whereas in the Bears and the Bees, you have open choice of who you target, and logically, you're going to target the player that is at the greatest advantage, that has the fewest cards. So it always feels fair that you're being selected and targeted because I'm about to go out. Of course, you're going to give me the cards because you want to prolong the turn for you, and everyone else on the table is also happy with your decision, and you also agree with it. Even if you don't like it, you're like, well, I see why you did that. I can understand.
And it never feels like in other games like Uno, again, to bring it back to that example, where the games you just go on forever and ever and ever because you keep getting draw 2, draw 4, and like pick your turn. It was just very well done. So on that note, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question on how do you go about balancing the games and making sure you have that like you do in Bears and the Bees.
I have kind of my own calculations that I do where I on my spreadsheet I'll build out like the utility of a card and how much power it has. Like for example, if a card is going to cause that someone else draw 2 cards, it needs to be twice as difficult to play as a card that is going to cause someone to draw 1 card. And so that's kind of the way that I balance it. That I balance the work or the effort required to do a thing with the reward that you achieve for doing that. And it varies based on the kind of game that you're building, but that basic philosophy I always follow. There also is a philosophy that the better an element is in a game, the rarer it should be as well. So like in Cover Your Kingdom, the higher value character cards are less plentiful than the lower value character cards. and that doesn't always have to be the case, but I like doing that within games because once again, it creates a sense of kind of fairness and balance within the game.
Right.
And balance is really important to me. I'm a middle child, so I'm very fairness oriented. Let me tell you,
Right
like,
there
I was out on Christmas Eve counting presents, making sure we all got the same amount, and you know, I was going around the table, checking the milk, making sure everyone had the same amount in their cups exactly if I poured it out for dinner. So when you're forgotten as the middle child, you make sure that you're remembered at key moments there. So no, I joke about it, but that honestly is, I think, part of the reason why fairness matters to me, and because I am so keyed into when a game feels unfair or unbalanced. It really completely turns me off on wanting to play that game again if I get the sense of you just did that because you got lucky. Like, that was the only reason you won, because you drew that thing and got to do that thing. And if I had done it, I would have won the game. And that's what the wild draw 4s are in Uno most of the time.
Yep.
All the time.
100%. Yep.
Keep talking. I'm just going to run over and grab a charger for my phone because it is running low on batteries. Keep talking. I'm listening.
Yeah, no worries. I guess one thing I wanted to ask, Jeff, is obviously we started off kind of mentioning the 5 new games that you're going to be producing for Deseret Book. Is there a timeline for those games when we can expect those? I think it was sometime the end of this year. And then is there any other information that you can share about those games that our viewers or listeners can hear to look forward to them?
I probably should have read the contract better to see if there's anything I'm not supposed to talk about, but I'm just going to claim ignorance and talk about whatever I want to. So,
you don't want to get you in trouble, Jeff.
Yeah. If you guys are listening to this podcast at Deseret Book, I apologize in advance. So, this is enhancing value for your company because I'm doing marketing before the games are even out. It's very nice of me. So Deseret Book Project is really cool. So this is the first time that I am venturing out on my own, away from my parents' business and developing my own line of games. The last project that I did with my parents was the Cover Your Cookies project, which was launched in all of the Crumble stores last year, and that was really fun and a cool thing to get to do. But after working full time with the company for 3 or 4 years, I led the redesign project where we updated all the packaging to make it more consistent and more modern, and to have more standardized trade dress on our boxes. And that was such a massive project that it kind of burnt me out, honestly. And there was not really the role that was available for me at Grandpa Beck's Games was to be doing more of the business operations and sales. And I'm a designer at heart. Like, I'm a product designer, and when I was only going to have the opportunity to design a game maybe every 3 or 4 years, kind of as my reward for doing the rest of it, it's like, you know what, that's not what I want to do. And so I stepped away from my parents' business, and that was a really difficult decision to make. I also learned working with them, it's really hard to have a good relationship with both your bosses and your parents because they're such different roles. And ultimately, it was not healthy for our family relationship for me to be working in a full-time capacity. Now, I have other siblings that work with my parents, and they're just not as combative, I guess, as I am, because they do just fine with them. But I don't know when to shut my mouth when I really strongly believe something, and when I get fixated on a mechanic that I want. Like, I have a vision that I want to follow in products that I create. So this branching out and doing my own company was the opportunity for me to be able to be both the game designer as well as the brand designer and the art and graphic design director on a game. So I could see it from end to end without having to design by committee and without having the preconceived kind of rules that we have for Grandpa Beck's Games in terms of the mechanics and the components and the size of the boxes. Like, those are things that are really good for Grandpa Beck's Games, but they also can narrow the scope of what we're able to do. Like, that was a huge deal that I made Cover Your Kingdom in a box that was different from all the rest of them, and that it added new components that were not playing cards. Like, that was a big departure from what we've done in the past. So this gives me the opportunity to kind of create on my own and lead my own team, and also to do things really, really fast. Because when you're designing with a larger group, you have a lot more decision makers, and you end up redoing things more frequently because you get different insights, and I think we should do it this way, and also more discussion. With my team that's working on the new company, which is going to be called Eventide Creations, by the way. That's the name of the game line for Deseret Book.
Nice.
There are just 4 of us, me, a really talented artist, a really talented graphic designer, and then my business partner, Mike, who is a CPA and also a avid board game player. And he is kind of like, he's good at all the things that I really suck at, like being an adult, and being responsible, and following through on things, and remembering to write people checks. Like those things he's really good at. And I'm not good at those things. So I'm really good at talking on podcasts and coming up with obscure game ideas. That's really my skill set in life. This is my forte. Yeah. I just need to figure out a way to monetize the chatting on podcasts thing, because I could do that really well. So.
we love it. We love it.
So there are 5 games that are currently planned with Deseret Book. The way that the contract works is that it is an open contract, and additional titles can be added to that. Or if we run into issues in developing a title, or decide that we have a better idea, we can also substitute out those titles. It's a totally different approach than I think I've ever seen taken before, and that I think kind of stems into my creativity as a game designer, is also figuring out what the incentives are. That's a really important aspect of game design, is figuring out how to win that game and what actions you need to take in order to do well there. And so I actually started my own game company called Whimsy Pop about 3 years ago with some of these similar players here. And we fully designed and created a game called Rapid Raptors, which is completely done. The artwork's gorgeous. The gameplay is really fun, and it was never released because there's this really pesky pandemic that happened right when it was going to be finished. So I invested over $10,000 in artwork and graphic design on this project. And then the price of components and shipping went through the roof. And I realized that if I printed that game, there's a very good chance I would lose money on selling each copy instead of making money from it. So I had to shelve it. And that's when I went back to my parents, because I'd already started to leave Grandpa's Games, and I went back and did the Cover Your Cookies project. That idea came along. But when that wrapped up, I needed to do something else to pay the bills, and also to feed that desire to do creative things. And the idea of so the problem with Rapid Raptors was, well, I have this great concept, but I've got to launch it on Kickstarter. I've already invested all this time and money. What if it doesn't do very well there? Mm-hmm. And also the cost of fulfillment to individuals is really high. Like if you print a game that you're selling for $20 on Kickstarter, your cost to develop that game is going to be in the several thousands of dollars minimum for the artwork and graphic design to be done. So right away, you've got that fixed cost that you're up against. And then there's a per unit cost on the number that you print. And the smaller the number of games that you print, the higher the cost per unit. So you run a tremendous risk once you put that project out there, that if it doesn't reach a certain threshold, you will have done all that work to essentially have made nothing. And also, very few games, even those that are wildly successful on Kickstarter, have an easy transition from Kickstarter into retail. A lot of them, that's the entirety of their existence is Kickstarter, and then they're gone. Mm-hmm. And then you have to figure out, after you've done a Kickstarter campaign, which are wildly exhausting as well. It's so much work. I did a Kickstarter campaign for Cover Your Kingdom, and that was back in, I think, 2019 or 2020, and I'm still tired, I swear.
Oh man!
Our artist got her first book deal, April Stott, and went to write her book, which we were so excited about. But it happened just a couple of weeks before the campaign launched, and we didn't have a graphic designer at the time. So I taught myself the entire suite of Adobe products in order to do all of the graphic design for the box and the rule book and all of the Kickstarter campaign. I'd never used any of those programs before. So I was watching tutorial videos and stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning every night and working 16-hour days on my computer to build this campaign that had to launch while we were also simultaneously packing up our house to move to Utah. So that was a time where I really grew to understand why it's so important to find good talent and pay them well. So I don't have to do things like that. Anyways, back to what I was talking about before, which you'll have to remind me because I have no idea where I was going with that. I was saying something about making games.
I
I think
the new game projects you were developing.
Oh yeah, yes. So I realized that going through Kickstarter was a really scary way to launch a game company because there's so much variability and the path is not paved for you after the campaign.
Yeah.
And you spend all this time and energy and effort into launching the product, and then you've got to figure out how to sell it. And it's also terrifying. She's like, well, I sold 3,000 on this campaign. Do I order 5,000 and then hope I'm going to be able to get 2,000 more sold through other stores? Or are they all going to end up in my garage? And I'm going to have spent everything that I've made from selling to 3,000 on this additional 2,000 that maybe aren't going to sell. Or maybe, and that game hasn't been out at all yet either. Like no one's reviewed it, no one's played it. You don't even know if there's like a major mechanical issue that you didn't catch that's going to prohibit people from buying it. So there's just a lot of risk. And when I was evaluating how to encounter that, I thought, what if instead of designing games for the mass market, I found a very niche market that I knew loved games and could design games that are for that market that really don't exist on the market space. And what if I could find a retailer that sells to that market exclusively that I could go into and pitch the concept of creating exclusive products for in exchange for giving them a better price on those products and having them purchase them in a large enough quantity that I can get an affordable cost per unit.
So that was around the country, probably too, right?
Yeah. The Deseret Book, I think, has 40 locations right now, and they're constantly opening new ones, and they also have an online store. Right about this time, as this idea was coming to kind of in my mind, because I established the connection with Deseret Book for Grandpa Beck's Games a few years ago and got our line into their stores, and they've been some of their best-selling products within that segment since then. They do very well in Deseret Book, and we have a big audience for Grandpa Beck's Games within those stores. So around that time when this idea was coming to my mind, a good friend of mine from Seattle ended up getting hired by Deseret Book as a vice president. And so I sent him a message out of the blue, and I said, I know it's been years since we talked, but I have this kind of crazy idea that I want to run by you and see what you think. So I went to his house. I was honestly more nervous for that meeting than I have been for almost any other meeting in my life because so much was riding on it. Once I had that idea in my head, I was like, I have to do this. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to be devastated because I really want this to work. This is a path that can take my team into stability and like actually be able to fulfill this vision that I have of having my own game company. So I went and met with him, and he immediately, like within 10 minutes, understood the concept and loved it. So he connected me with other employees within the company, and then he stepped back because that's what a really good leader does. Is he empowers his employees to make their own decisions. So he set up the ball on the tee for me, and then he let me swing. And fortunately, the two women that I met with, who are also managers within the company, both understood the vision I had. We had that trust established from the games that I designed for Grandpa Beck's Games. And we had just the most amazing meetings as we discussed this plan. And then we figured out a contract and quantities. And I went in, they wanted 4 games from me originally, but I went in and I presented 5 different concepts of this is the title, this is the basic idea of how it's going to work, and this is kind of the idea of the way that I'm going to design it to look. And after presenting all 5, they said, well, we're going to do 5 of them instead of 4.
Yeah. Like, we want all 5. Give it to us.
Excellent.
So
that's wonderful.
The first one that we're working on is called The Lost Sheep. And that is meant to be a very, very entry-level game, like very gateway. And it's a push your luck memory game. So it looks like a traditional memory game when you lay it on the table that you have tiles that you put face down. And a traditional memory game, you flip over until you find 2 that are matching, you take it away. That's like been the concept of every memory game. What I like to do is take a concept that's existed, that people have liked, but that is inherently lame, and make it cool. So the concept there is really quite boring, and there's it's just memory. There's not and also just some dumb luck. So the way that that the Lost Sheep works is a little bit different. You have 6 different kinds of tiles. You have sheep tiles in different quantities of either 1, 2, or 3. And as you might guess from what I discussed earlier, there are a lot more 1s than there are 2s, and there's only 1 3 because the higher the reward, the rarer that card should be. In addition to that, you have wolf cards, or wolf tiles, and then you have shepherd tiles, and then you have some tiles that are the desert tiles that are just empty. And on your turn, you can flip over as many tiles as you would like. However, if you encounter a wolf tile, that immediately ends your turn, and you only get to take with you one of the sheep tiles that you flipped over. So if you've exposed 3 or 4 sheep tiles, you can take the highest value one that you found, but the rest of them get flipped back over and are very easy for the next player then to locate or find. Also, your turn can end if you flip over 2 desert tiles on your turn, because you've become exhausted from wandering and not finding anything. So maybe you've exposed 2 or 3 sheep before that, and you flip over a desert and another desert, that ends your turn. Or you can choose at any time to say, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to take home the sheep that I found right now. So that small amount of decision making really makes the game compelling. It's really good for kids because it teaches them like how to have, like, when do I have enough, and do I need to keep pushing, because it's really disappointing when you unveil a bunch of sheep and then you lose them because of the wolf. Now, the shepherds play an interesting role within the game as well, because as the game is played, there are fewer and fewer tiles that are exposed, which means that the probability of flipping over a wolf increases, and there are enough tiles that it's kind of hard to remember sometimes where they're at. So you'd end up flipping over the wolves and really having a hard time finding those last sheep. So the shepherds, when they're found, you immediately set it off to the side, and then the next time a wolf is exposed by either you or a subsequent player, it covers that wolf. And there are 3 shepherds and 6 wolves, so they will eventually cover half of the wolves as the amount of tiles scales down. So it automatically, it both benefits you, because on a turn that if you expose that wolf, instead of losing all the sheep, it ends your turn, but you get to keep all the sheep. The shepherd saves you from losing the sheep that you found. And if you guys are following all this with just verbal explanation without seeing it, I really applaud you on that, because I would be so lost right now if I was listening to myself.
I love
it. Sounds really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a unique game, and I'm proud of it, because it, like, my 4-year-old can play it, but my wife and I will play it as well, and we have fun playing it as adults. Is it the best, most compelling game ever? No, but it's probably one of the broadest games I've ever played in terms of audience that can enjoy it. Yeah. Now, conversely, you're going to love this, Lisa. That's the competitive version of the game. I also, on the back side of the rule sheet, have a cooperative version of the game.
There you go.
Where in that version of the game, you're working together to rescue as many sheep as you can in 12 turns total. So you're going to have tokens that show a sun traveling across the sky, and each time you flip over a new token, it's another hour has passed. So you have 12 turns total to go out and save the lost sheep. And then you're working together and saying, my job is just to remember that one there is a wolf. That's the only one I'm going to focus on, because if I try to remember too many things, I'm going to forget. But you make the assignments and you work together to try to save as many sheep as you can, and then your score is determined by how many turns you're able to, or you can do it in under 12 turns. That's the best. But if you also will have, if there are any sheep that are left, that counts against your score at the end. So that's the way that one works. So that's the first title, and I'm super excited about it. So, sorry, what was that?
I'm excited to get that one. What was the name of that one?
It was the Lost Sheep.
Lost Sheep.
The Lost Sheep is what it's called. Yep.
All right, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it reminds me a lot of Pikmin.
Pikmin.
You got to collect all your assets and then leave the planet before night falls.
Oh yeah. That's that. And I haven't played that game, but it doesn't surprise me at all that there are other games with similar mechanics. Honestly, if I could compare it to another game, the game I'd compare it to is Quacks of Quedlinburg, which doesn't play anything like it, but this is essentially the distillation. If you took all of Quacks and took it down to just the very core of what makes Quacks fun, that's what this game is stripping away everything except for the mechanic of push your luck. So anyways.
Wow. And you heard it here first.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the first one. We have 4 other ones as well that are in the works. The second one will be called Tentatively Red Against Blue, with the tagline of "You Know Why," with the letter U and then no and then Y.
I love it. It's genius.
and that is another concept that I'm taking a tried and true concept and turning it on its side, where it's going to be a team-based trick-taking game. And so you'll have a feeling like Skull King in that it's a trick-taking game. However, at the end of each round, you don't have one person winning and everyone else losing. It's half of the room gets to be the winners. And it also, like Cover Your Assets, incites lots of table talk and banter and teasing because it's constantly going back and forth. It's very simple in concept. And this one, keep in mind, I haven't even play tested fully, so this may not be an accurate description, but essentially the way it works is you have a deck of cards for each team, and the team members sit alternating fashion. So red, blue, red, blue, red, blue around the table. Say if it's an 8-player game, you'd have 4 red players, 4 blue players. You each draw cards from your own deck, and those cards are numbered from 1 to 5. And at the beginning of each trick, you flip over a coin, and it's either going to have the highest side or the lowest side up. And that tells you what you're competing to have, the highest score or the lowest score that round. And then you'll play cards from your hand, one after another, onto the table to create the score for your team. Now, if you were to just do that, that would be massively boring. You'd just be like, oh, well, it's lowest, so I'll play my 1, and that does it. But the mechanic that gives it a twist is that the 3 value cards, the ones that are in the center between 1 and 5, those cards each are accompanied by an action when you play them. And it might be something like, take a ×2 token from the sideboard and place it on any card you'd like. So if you're playing for highest and your teammate has played a 5, you can put that ×2 token on his 5, and now you have 10. There might be another one that says, take a nullify token and place it on any card to cancel its score. So right after you've played that, they then play a token, or play the 3 on their side, and they grab the null token and they put it on the card that has the ×2, and that 10 now is worth 0. And then another one comes out that says you can move any token in play to another card. So you take that null token off of your card and you move it over onto their 4 that they played. And then there are like swap a card from your team to the other team, or discard a card and draw 2 new cards from the deck and choose one of those to replace it. So each one of there'll be 10 different actions that those 3 cards, 10 to 12 different actions that 3 cards play, which make the game super swingy and punchy. And so you won't know who wins until the very last card is played in every single trick. Wow, and that should lead to that social experience where you're on the edge of your seat and cheering and having fun the whole time, but with half of the table getting to win instead of just one person, which I think is kind of unique.
Yeah.
So that's one that I've played extensively in my head, but it's never actually been on the table. So hopefully it looks something like that when it's actually done.
Well, if you need play testers,
that's what I was going to say.
I would love. I'm always in need of play testing it, and however, I have some stipulations when I have play testers. I only like play testers who will tell me when they don't like something. I hate it when I play test with someone. If someone after I play test them say this is perfect, I love it exactly as is, I'm never gonna play test with you again. I want to hear what you don't like about it. I might disagree with you and defend what my decision making was, but I want to hear and have you poke holes in my bubbles there, because that's how you grow as a game designer. Is you have people critique and make suggestions, and then you try new things and you end up figuring out better ways to do things than you did before.
Absolutely.
I love doing that. I was a play tester for I don't know if you heard of Thunder Road Vendetta. But they just came out with a new expansion for the game. They just kickstarted it, and I was a play tester for the new expansion. And I came out with a laundry list of things like I did not like this, I did not like this. And by the time they launched the Kickstarter, they fixed every single one of my issues.
Isn't that great?
So it was great. It was good to hear.
That's really important, that play testing and having play testers that are willing to speak up and tell you what they like, what they don't like. That's really good. Lisa, question?
Thank you.
Are you raising your hand? That's very nice of you. You can just yell at me.
So I actually have a concern that I wanted to bring up, and that's that I don't know how soon your games are to being released, and if you're revealing the details of your games, like,
did someone steal them?
Yeah, is somebody gonna steal your game ideas if we have them on
the
podcast?
That is a scarcity mindset belief that if you share an idea, someone else could take it and use it before you. First off, those 2 games are both going to be done in 6 to 8 weeks. So I challenge someone else to do them faster.
There you go. And if someone claims that they came up with the idea, we'll literally say you heard it here first.
And as soon as, and honestly, with U.S. copyright law, it benefits you to share a title and share artwork before it's released, because as soon as that exists in the public domain, you have the copyright for that thing. Trademark's a little bit different, but I have never been one to hide or conceal my ideas, because in sharing them, I get feedback. It, like, just in explaining the game and hearing you guys say that sounds really fun, I like that idea. That's great. That helps me. It provides me validity that concept is a good one. It also gives me the opportunity to practice explaining how the game works, which is a really important function in selling that game. Whether it be in a video or in person at a convention, you need to be able to explain eloquently how a game works so a person can imagine why it's fun to play. So I'm very much an abundance mindset thinker, that the more things you put out into the world and the more that you share with others, the more comes back to you.
Real game.
And so I've never been one to hide my hand. I want to share it with others. And if someone comes to me asking for advice or feedback, I'm always very willing to give it as well. And I don't withhold my connections to stores or to publishers. Like, if you want to get involved in this, it's just more games for me to play. That makes me happy.
Well, so you told us 2 of the games. Do you have the names or anything? You don't have to go through a full.
Yeah, the other 3 are more speculative, because they're more concepts and ideas right now. But one of the ones that I'm most confident for sure is going to happen, because the concept is freaking hilarious, is called Church Potluck. And you have a handful of cards that are like your quintessential Utah dishes of like funeral potatoes.
Green Jello.
Yes, green Jello is literally the wild card in the game here. So, and you're gonna have an assignment of, this is what you have to bring this time to the potluck. And you'll flip over a card from the assignment deck, and it might be an entree, a dessert, or a salad, or it might be, you can bring either a salad or a dessert. And so you have to play a card that matches those requirements from your hand. And when you do so, you put it down face down, and you say out loud what you're bringing. Like, I'm bringing funeral potatoes. However, you don't have to tell the truth. You can say you're playing funeral potatoes, but actually play something else, which you might be doing if you're trying to sneak in the green Jello, which is a wild, and you don't want anyone else to know that you're playing the Jello. Or you might want to announce you're playing the Jello, because the way that you score points in the game, and this is all theoretical right now, is you want to have 0 points. That's the ideal. However, if you bring the same dish as someone else, you both have to bring it home with you as leftovers.
Oh, I love it.
And so the more value that card has in its utility as a wild, because there'll be cards that can be played in one category, those that can be played in 2 categories that are like a salad and a dessert, like a cookie salad. Well, it's technically a salad because it's got salad right there in the name, but it's also a dessert. So you can play it in either one of those categories, or you'll have the Jello, which is, we don't know what that is. Is it a salad? Is it a dessert? Is it an entree? We don't know. So it can be literally anything. So the more utility it has, the more points, the more you're going to receive for taking that back. So the worse it is that you have to take it back. And right now I have it envisioned that, like, literally probably as much as like 20% of the deck is going to be green Jello. So you're just constantly trying to get rid of that stuff.
That's awesome.
So it'll be a bluffing game, is the way I'd envision it. But that one, once again, is fairly theoretical right now. The last 2 that I have in concept, one is called Gadianton Robbers, and it's going to be a social deduction game.
Okay.
Where you have kind of like a mafia or secret Hitler type game, where you're trying to root out the villains, and the villains are trying to eliminate the good guys. And then the last concept is called tentatively Wagon Packin, and it's about loading up your wagon to cross the plains and balancing between bringing all the items that you have to bring that are essential, while also leaving space for like family heirlooms that otherwise would be left behind. So that one may change, because they really want that one by the end of the year, and the mechanics I've envisioned for it are the most complex to design. And so it may end up getting supplanted by an idea I literally came up with today, that I haven't proposed to them yet. But I have a new concept that I really love called Gulls and Crickets, and it's based on the story of the California seagulls eating up the Mormon crickets, which are actually not crickets, but I think katydids. But that's a game concept which I won't explain the mechanics of today, but it should be really fun. Also a cooperative game and really rowdy and loud, as you'd imagine with seagulls. So
Those all sound very fun.
yeah. So
I
I hope that this develops into a line of as many as 10 or 12 games that are for Deseret Book over the next 2 or 3 years. That's my end goal. And then also to do additional products like puzzles and children activity books and other things within that same family category.
Awesome. Well, we're excited. I think we've, at least for me, you've whet my appetite. My appetite is whetted. So thank you.
Glad to hear it.
We appreciate everything that you've shared with us. Again, you guys have heard it here first. Don't forget to drop a comment. Let us know what ideas, what some of your favorite Grandpa Beck games are. And for you, Jeff, where can they find you? What would be the best, I guess, website or place to
find me?
Yeah, just about you or Grandpa Beck games or photography,
well,
anything that
if
you're
you
doing.
want to follow my photography, you can follow JBeck Photos on Instagram or on Facebook. If you want to follow my comedy, because I also do stand-up comedy, you can look up Crossroads Comedy. And then if you want to follow my game design, right now, just follow me on Facebook. That's where I post about it most frequently. And you'll search for Jeff Beck, and you'll see a bunch of stuff about a guitarist who has really nice arms for an old guy who's dead. That's not him. That's not me. I'm the other Jeff Beck. I'm not the Jeff Beck who is a game designer that lives in Salt Lake. He's a friend of mine, but I'm the other Jeff Beck game designer that lives in Utah. And not the other Jeff Beck game designer that I think lives in Indiana, who's Jeff Beck #1 on Board Game Geek, because there are 3 Jeff Beck game designers that are currently living and active. So yeah. I thought there was competition with guitarists, but no, it's really the game designers that are all Jeff Becks apparently.
Must be something in the name, right?
That's right.
yeah.
And if you're intrigued by these games, please support the Grandpa Beck's game line. Honestly, every title in that line is a blast. We just came out with a new one a little while called Another Man's Treasure, and I wrote all of the really dorky, stupid quips in it. So if you enjoyed the ones in Cover Your Kingdom,
Yes.
it's a lot more of that really warped and dumb dad humor in that game. So
Love it.
Very good.
yeah.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much, guys. Don't forget to check him out at grandpabecksgames.com. And stay tuned because we will be having a giveaway. We're going to be giving away one of the Grandpa Beck's games and potentially one of the future games from Deseret Book. So if you like this content, you want to subscribe to some more nerdy content, hit the subscribe button, give us a like, ring that notification bell, and we will be sure to let you guys know of the giveaway and any other information in the future. And David, I want to thank you as well for joining us. Where can they find you?
Just Shelf Help Gaming on YouTube.
Great.
So we talk about board games, all thing board games, game reviews. We're trying to get some strategic playthroughs eventually on the channel, top 10 lists, that sort of thing.
Wonderful. Love it. Yeah. Thanks again, everyone. And
Stay
until
nerdy.
That's right. Until next time.
I wanted to say that. It felt
You got
appropriate.
That's our outro. You nailed it. There you go.
Hey, I didn't even know that. That's great.
All right, guys. Keep it nerdy.
Yeah.
All right. There we go. Sorry to steal the thunder there, also. You guys have a good time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Jeff.
Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you for your time.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.